Hey you guys, it's Jeff here, the Bee Whisperer. We were going to go out to the bee farm this week, but unfortunately the weather didn't permit. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the door here and you guys can see what we're dealing with. So you can see we got a big storm that comes down from the north. So that's why we didn't get to do the bee farm today, unfortunately. So we're just going to sit here in the office, and basically we're going to segue into a Q&A, everything related to bees. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, I'd be more than happy to answer any of those. Anything that has to do with beehives and keeping of bees, and anything that I have experience with and knowledge about. And
why don't you tell people how long you've been working with bees for? Like, when did you first start?
I started a long time ago. I was about 15 or 16 years old back in the late 70s. I started out with a mom and pop bee removal company in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And during the spring months, when we get out for springtime, I'd go up there to the house and help them load up the hive boxes, and we'd go out and chase bee swarms and remove beehives from people's properties. And pretty much right after doing that for a few seasons, I knew that I absolutely loved it. I had to do more of it because I couldn't get enough of it. My mom thought I was crazy. She said, "I don't know how you can do that, Jeff. Doesn't it hurt when you get stung?" And I said, "Yeah, it hurts." She goes, "Well, why do you do it then?" I said, "Mom, I love getting the beehives out. I love the honey coming, getting the honeycomb out of the walls." And every day.
What's up, Victor?
Hi, Victor.
Hey, Victor, how's it going, buddy? So, I'd have fresh honey on our table every day and get fresh honeycomb right out of the hive, eat it right there at the job site. And I pretty much got the bee bug early on in life.
So, how old are you? Like, tell people how much, how old you are and how much experience you've had with bees. You've been doing this since you were 15, yeah? Yeah,
right around 15 years old. I'm now 52, so I've been doing this for about almost 37 years I've been doing this. Well, with a few breaks in between. I did construction and I did a few other jobs, along the way. But total combined time, I'd say, is close to almost 30 years now.
What's up, Hask?
Hey, Hask, how's it going, buddy?
So if you have any questions for the Bee Whisperer, anything you ever wanted to know about bees, now's your time. You got an experienced pro who's been in the beekeeping industry and removed beehives for a living.
For a long time.
For a long time,
So why bees again? What were you doing with?
For me, it was all about the excitement of going out to the job sites and opening up a wall or a roof where a beehive was building. And it was always a rush when you pull that first board off, seeing that honeycomb hanging up inside the wall. It was amazing to me how these bees could build something that large. I mean, we'd pull hives.
Leo?
Hey, Leo, how's it going, bud? We'd pull hives out sometimes that were like 70, 80 pounds. I mean, sometimes even bigger than that. And it was just amazing to me that these bees could build a hive that big, and sometimes within a couple of years. So
no logo said, "Do you ever get stung?"
Oh man, I've been stung so many times I don't even know. I'd say probably, if I had to guess, thousands of times. The worst I've been stung in one day though was it was about 35 times. The man that I worked for, his son didn't want to secure the beehives on the back of a truck one day. And we went and got this old man who was getting out of the business, picked up his beehives for him, and he didn't strap the load down. So when we got back to the bee farm to drop off the beehives, they had tipped over, spilling all over our gear. Our gloves, helmets, and veils were back there, and there was 3 of us in the truck, and we all got stung at least 30 or 40 times.
But
What's up, Angelina?
Leo just made a good point that bees are the key to humanity, don't you think? I mean,
oh, absolutely. If we, the thing is that we need to protect the pollinators. These little honeybees are amazing creatures, and if we don't protect them and see that we keep them healthy, the foods that we eat and a lot of the almonds and a lot of the foods that are on our table are a direct result of the honeybees pollinating these crops. And that's why there's a lot of things going on right now in the government where they've got the Pollinator Protection Act, and they're doing things to help reduce the likelihood of causing non-target pest destruction, such as on honeybees and other animals.
You know what I found amazing, because I was the same way before I started working with bees. I find it amazing that so many people are scared of bees. Like, they run.
Hey, oh, yeah. I'm still scared of bees. I've never been stung. I work here in the office, but I'll tell you what, for 40 years, I see a bee, I scream, I run, it works. I've never been stung. You, on the other hand.
What I usually do is I scream and I run, I put my gear on, then I come back with a whole new attitude. No, all joking aside.
I know. I don't know how I've managed to never be stung after working with a bee removal company for so long. I've certainly been around it enough, and I've even actually been at the bee farm in a bee suit before, but only once, because I am scared of bees. I think that's the key. If you're afraid of bees, you stay away. You don't.
Well,
mess with
I'm
them.
allergic to bees, and I jump right in.
It's kind of amazing because there's a lot of people that are absolutely terrified of bees, and I understand their sting is painful. And if you're one of the unfortunate people who is allergic to the venom, it can be, it can put you in a hospital. And for those who are severely allergic, it is life threatening.
What's up, Delicio?
Hey, Delicio, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
33.
So what do y'all do, Jeff?
What do you do, Jeff?
Actually, I'm a bee removal specialist right here in San Diego, California, and we've got a small mom and pop company, and we go out to people's properties when they call us with a bee problem, whether it be a swarm or a hive on their property in a tree or a bush, or sometimes they'll build inside the wall cavity or inside the roof or the attic area. And what makes
At a bee
us
farm?
we got a little bee farm where when we take the swarms live, we'll relocate them. We'll take them out there and drop them off in a beehive or a temporary makeshift nuke box. And that's kind of what makes us much different than a lot of the companies, is the fact that our service, we try to save as many bee swarms in small hives as we can.
So speaking of removing them from roofs, you had a story earlier of this gigantic hive dripping into a living room of some sort. So talk about that, man.
This is amazing. You guys ain't going to believe this. I go out to this job. This is about 25, 26 years ago, back in the early 90s. And this family calls us out to this job site to do an estimate. I get called to go out. My boss sends me. It was back when I was working for someone else. And I go out there, and in their living room, they got a 4x4 with a 2x4 nailed to the top of it like this, like a T, like a draftsman's T square you'd see, but a big 8-foot board going all the way across their living room roof with the ceiling bowing and dripping honey with a live beehive. Now, I told them their couch is sitting right like maybe 7 or 8 feet from this, where this bowing is in the ceiling, and honey's dripping with about 80 to 100 pound hive. And I told them, I said, look, if you guys are in this living room when this ceiling gives way or collapses, I said, everyone in here is going to probably end up in the hospital. Well, didn't hear anything, back from the people. We didn't land the job, and about 5 or 6 years later, I get called out to the same house. When I pull up in front of the house, I remembered I'd been there before, but I couldn't remember the details. But the minute they opened their front door and I saw that T in their ceiling, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And I said, you guys still haven't removed this hive yet? And I couldn't believe it. I was like, you guys are still sitting underneath this beehive?
I gotta say hi to Little C. Peters. How's it going?
What's up, buddy?
Hey, how's it
Peter's
going,
back
buddy?
on.
Thanks for joining us.
Orange
Right on,
blossom
brother.
honey.
So,
Hey. He was just in the middle of telling a story. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so anyway, after the second time, 5 years later, they didn't call me back. They didn't hire me. I don't know what ended up happening to the job. I don't know if they hired someone or if it's still there 30 years later, But I can only imagine if someone came to their house and knowing that honey is dripping out of their ceiling and they're coming over to watch a blockbuster movie and they're sitting underneath the beehive. I can only imagine how exciting that must be.
Well, and that came up because we had just gotten done doing a job where the honey was actually coming out of the stucco, out of the roof, and dripping down the side of the window. Imagine like you're like waking up in the morning and have honey dripping down your window.
Yeah, that's right.
It looked like somebody just threw it on there, right? But it's actually it came from the roof.
It was actually, what happened was they had other companies that came out and sprayed the hive, but they didn't remove the honeycomb and wax from the roof structure. So what ended up happening is, and it was really hot, it was during when we had that heat wave here in the high humidity, and it got up into the high 90s, low hundreds, like 101, 102 degrees, and it was hot for quite a few weeks. Well, the wax started to melt, then the honey started seeping and running down into the wall, and it was literally dripping down the window, and it actually soaked all the way through the stucco. These people didn't remove it, so then after, I guess they had the hive in there for about 4 or 5 years, and the honey soaked all the way down through the window, through the stucco, and it was literally staining the wall. So they hired me to come out and open it and remove all the hive and honeycomb. I took out about, what would you say, Louis, 60 pounds, 55
Yeah, I think it was
pounds?
heavy, man.
I mean, that's 55 to 60 pounds of honey that I was actually able to pull out of the roof. That doesn't include the other 25 to 30 pounds that soaked into the structure that I wasn't able to get because it had impregnated into the surface.
That's freaking crazy.
So
tell people what we're doing today. Do a recap of what we're doing today, and then
We're talking about bees, and that's the main buzz that's going on right now. If anybody has a question about bees or wants to know anything, this is the man to do it. We were going to be broadcasting today from the bee farm, but show them the weather outside.
again, you guys, this is why we couldn't go out to the bee farm. Well, it's starting to clear up now a little bit.
It's raining. It's all drenched.
So, one of these days, whenever the weather permits, we're going to go out to the bee farm. We're going to show you live bees. And what I'd like to do is show you some of the places where beehives build. We've got birdhouses out there. We've got clay pots. And these are hives that were built into on the backs of people's patios or backyards or front yards. And they'll basically take over a birdhouse or a clay pot, anything that has a volume of space where the bees feel comfortable and safe that they could build a hive. And what we'll do is I'll go out and I'll wrap it and I'll load it into my truck and then take it out to the bee farm. I haven't got around to relocating these from the clay pots and putting them into an actual hive box yet. And to be honest, I'm not really excited about doing it because these bees were really aggressive. They chased these people and stung them every day they went in their backyard.
I'm curious to know where all y'all are from. If anybody's here in San Diego or what state or country
Put
are
your
y'all
city
from?
into the chat
There's
box.
a few people watching. Yeah. Anybody Southern California representing? Where are y'all from? We're here in, we're in a part of San Diego called La Mesa, out in the East County of San Diego. We've been here for
Almost 6 years. We've been in this location for about 6 years. We've been in the East County of La Mesa now for going on 16 years now. And the business has been around for 23 years. We're celebrating our 23rd anniversary this following season.
Hey, Silakoya, how's it going? We're trying to figure out where y'all are from, what country, what state. We're out here in La Mesa, California, answering your questions about bees. So anything you wanted to know, ask the Bee Whisperer. He's right here.
Hey, you guys, keep those questions coming.
So I remember you were talking about this pot. So we had this crazy idea, right? And maybe we can share it with the scopers here.
Let's do it. I think they might have a few other suggestions. We might be able to use something maybe a little safer than what we were planning.
I was trying to do the Mythbusters route,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
talk about what we were talking about.
Well, I said basically take a hammer and start cracking a seam down the side of the pot. And Lewis came up with a brilliant idea that makes us a lot safer when we do it. He was talking about a mechanical device that has like a little tripod that has a little arm that smashes into it and drops down about 2 inches every time it hits it. And this way we could be a safe distance 20, 30 feet back in our gear, and the bees would be attacking the machinery instead of us.
And we would have GoPros set up at all like different angles to show off like the kind of impact and the kind of like way that the bees would get upset, right?
Right, to show when the first impact hits, how you can see how they come out of the top of the clay pot, and as it's penetrating holes, we can have these different locations. That way you can see the behavior of the bee and how they go after the perpetrator or how they defend their hive.
Well, and that's a perfect example of how somebody just not knowing that there's bees inside their home,
Exactly.
inside their wall, and they go and they try to poke a hole in there, and all of a sudden, boom, right?
That's exactly right. A lot of times people don't know they have a hive. They're mowing their backyard or mowing the lawn, or they have a leaf blower or a power equipment, a chainsaw or something. And out of nowhere, they start getting attacked, and they just drop the stuff and run, and they don't even realize it. A lot of them don't even know they had a hive. They call and they go, I don't know where the bees even came from. All I know is I thought they were flies, and they're swatting, and they're realizing they're getting stung, and then they drop the chainsaw or tool, and they run in the house and call us. So, yeah, it's pretty scary stuff when you're getting attacked, and you don't even know that there's a beehive there.
And we also wanted to try to drop a camera inside of a hive too, right?
Oh,
aggravate them a little bit.
Well, stir them up a little bit, and too, the viewers could get a bird's eye view looking down into a hive, which is really something that only a beekeeper or someone who works hive boxes or a bee removal person is going to see. So I think it'd be really exciting for the general public to be able to go down in there and actually see the bees up close and personal and see the cellular design of the hive.
Do you guys got any questions?
Any questions for the Bee Whisperer? Now's your time. Anything bee related?
Come on, you guys, give me some questions. Anything.
Bees are often disturbed by vibrations, so a lot of times when people get attacked by bees, it's because of a lawnmower or a motorcycle. But there's some funny stories that you've encountered in the field. Tell them about the one with the trolley.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. There's this lady, she lives by the trolley line here in San Diego, and every time the trolley would run by her house, the vibrations from the train going by her house would vibrate the ground. And she had this huge hive hanging in a bush in her backyard. It was about probably, I would say, 50 to 65 feet from her back door. But because the hive had gotten up about the size of a beach ball, one of those inflatable beach balls that you use, which is a pretty good size, I would guess probably a 40, 50-pound hive. If she was in the backyard when that train went by, these bees would start attacking her. So she figured it out. When she heard the arm signal bells going off, she would run for her backyard or for her back door and go inside the house. And she'd been doing it for years because this hive had gotten really large. But it was interesting that she knew every time she heard the signal arms that it was time to get her butt back inside the house. Well, needless to say, when we went there to go remove it, I made sure I waited until the train went by before I started working on it.
And you also said stuff like what happened with the garage door openers, right? The bees would be inside a garage, and as soon as every time they opened their garage, the bees would attack.
We would go out to jobs where people, they'd have a wasp nest or a beehive near the garage door, and when they'd hit the remote, the motor from the arm up above making the garage door go up would set the bees off. And we get a lot of stories like that where people have an electric gate, a garage door, or something that vibrates intermittently whenever they need to get into something, and that triggers the bees to start attacking.
I remember that one time you were ripping open that wall, right? And we were filming, and then all of a sudden, like, this dog comes out of the patio, right? And you're like, get your dog in the house! Hurry! Like, and the bees started coming out. They started attacking me in the camera. Right?
Yep.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
That was crazy.
Yeah,
man.
I was yelling and screaming for them to get there because they had this little dog. I mean, a dog weighed at most, soaking wet, weighed about 10 or 15 pounds. And all I could picture was those bees attacking that dog and hurting it really bad or killing it.
But that's something more specific to like our area down in the south of the United States and Mexico. We have a higher percentage of Africanized bees. People up north probably wouldn't deal with that type of thing as frequently. So that's kind of a thing to know, that we tend to run into the angry bees a lot more being in an Africanized zone. What are the statistics on that again for bees in San Diego?
The latest statistics are, the percentages varies throughout the county. So there's pocket areas that have a higher percentage of Africanized hybrid bees than certain other areas. Like you can go into a community of San Diego and you take the whole San Diego metro area and it might only be like 35-40%. But there might be some pocket areas in the county that are next to canyons or areas where there's a higher population of Africanized hybrid bees, because there might be some hives down in the canyon underneath a manhole cover, or there might be some hives in a tree down in a ravine where they don't know. And once they kind of get established in that area, they start kicking out swarms. Now there's a higher percentage of the Africanized hybrid bees. But as a whole, San Diego, the current numbers are somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35 to 45%, and in the East County, which is going out east towards the deserts, it's much higher. It's about 65 to 75%. No, 80. I think it's 65 to 82%.
And how does that differ from other places, like where some of these people might be from? Like, we don't know where they're from because they're not chiming in, but maybe like Louisiana, Atlanta.
That's a good question.
I think the
parallels on the Earth. What they found is there's people who study this data very intensely, and they checked it out, and they found that from their study they found the 34th parallel going north and the 34th parallel going south. That's the zone that the bees will stay in. They will go a little bit further north and they will go further south. But once you start going much further out of those 34 parallels, you're going to have a much less Africanized hybrid population.
So when people say killer bees, right, they all get all scared, right? Oh my gosh, it's killer bees, isn't that?
Yep.
Same thing as Africanized, right? But so explain that to people, because we got a lot of questions last Periscope on killer bees, right? So they might not understand the difference?
The difference between the Africanized hybrid or killer bees, what they're called, is when they feel threatened, almost every single bee in that hive will empty out and attack the victim. You know, if you have an established hive with 50, 60,000 bees or more, and you've got, you know, almost all the bees, like 80 to 90% of them coming out after that person, they go overkill on the attack mechanism. Whereas the wild feral bees, the Italians or the Cornolians, the more gentler, dociler bees, they might send a couple hundred bees. So the difference will be a couple hundred bees coming after you versus, you know, 20,000 bees. I mean, there's times when I get done with an Africanized beehive and I look at my gloves and I've literally got thousands of stingers just on my gloves alone.
We got Atticus and Pelon.
Hi, how's
Hello.
it going? We're answering all your bee-related questions right now. The Bee Whisperer.
So what happens when they get stung? Like, what do they do? Like, if killer bees or Africanized bees are coming after you, which we've had people talk about.
Yeah, you know, when that happens, when you're coming under that kind of attack, the first thing you need to do, I mean, it's unfortunate because you don't know a lot of times where you're being attacked from. You don't know the direction of the hive, but
Why isn't honey considered vegan? We'll get to that question later.
Yeah.
Answer this one.
It's an animal product. That's why, because it's derived from an animal. But the Africanized bees, if they're attacking you, then you want to run. You want to get inside of the house. Now, some people, or inside of a car, if you have the keys, you don't want to jump in a car and then you don't have the keys to start it up, turn on the air conditioner, or drive away. But the biggest mistake some people make is they jump into a pool. And then when they jump into the pool, they think they're safe, but they can only hold their breath for a minute or so. And then the minute their head pops up out of the pool, well, guess what's going to happen? Yeah, you guessed it. You're going to be getting stung. They're going to be tuning you up, so to speak.
What about getting a straw and breathing out of the straw?
Yeah, if you jump in a pool and you got a little straw that you can breathe out of, but you got to make sure the straw is small enough so the bees can't go down inside of it. Because the minute you exhale, they smell the carbon monoxide. They're going to be attacking the end of that straw. If they can fit down that straw, yep, you guessed it.
Does smoke make bees angry? Well, I think Sherry's asking specifically of the Africanized bees. It doesn't make them angry, right? What it causes them to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the smoke causes them to think that there's a fire. So in reaction to that, they eat up all the honey in the hive.
As much as they can hold in their stomachs.
Which then creates them to be sort of like after you go to Hometown Buffet or whatever and you're really, really full.
Yeah.
And that... Doesn't it draw the stinger back into their abdomens, and they're just
Radical join. Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, buddy? Thanks for joining us.
They get really sluggish, right?
You know, some people want to know why you use a smoker, and that's a good question. You know, the reason why you smoke the bees is it docils them down, because what they do in the wild, when the smoke's blowing through the forest, long before the fire or the flame reaches the hive, the smoke's blowing there. What they'll start doing is they'll start eating their honey, and they'll fill their honey stomachs up, or their nectar stomachs. And this way, before they leave, if they have to take flight, they'll take as much of the food source with them, so that when they get to the new location, they have as much food as they can hold. That way, they don't have to start with an empty fridge, so to speak. Be like us, if our house was on fire, first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the refrigerator because we don't want to go. No, I'm just joking. But anyway, you get my point. You know, they want to have as much food, and when their stomachs are full, the bees can't bend their stomach like that, and they can't get the stinger in because their stomachs are full. So their abdomen would be like that, so the stinger wouldn't be able to get down inside the skin as easily.
Which is why you always see beekeepers, you know, smoking the hive boxes before they manipulate and cap the honey. But I wanted to bring back a question somebody asked
Sam
about.
join. What's up, Sam?
Hey, thanks for joining us.
There was a vegan, I think, who asked a question about why isn't honey considered vegan. Now, isn't there a new invention that allows people to harvest the honey without disturbing the hive? Isn't it called the hive flow? It was pretty recent.
It's called the free flow. I think it's called the free flow hive. And what it is they got a device. They came up with an invention where you can turn a knob, and it somehow uncaps it. I don't know the mechanical features of how this thing works. I haven't really looked at it. But
they say, hey, what's up, Radical?
But if you're vegan and you like honey and you don't want to feel guilty about eating honey, there is a new invention, I believe, that does not disturb the animals while harvesting the honey. That's what I found.
I think it's called the flowable honey, and it's got a little tube where you just turn it. You turn a knob or something. There's a mechanical device on there. It allows you to get the honey without actually pulling the frames out of the hive box.
Radical wants to talk to you. What's up? What's your
Hey,
question?
Radical.
We're ready for any and all questions.
He's all yours, buddy.
I'm here for you. Give me that question. I'll see if I can answer it. I don't know everything, but I know a lot.
Especially about bees.
Yeah, not much else. keep it in the bee sector, and I'll be looking like a brilliant guy.
He says he has a bee problem.
Oh, you do? Okay, where are your bees located?
What part of town?
So while he's getting his information across, on my deck. Does the stinger have a medical purpose? Another question, but he says it's on his deck and outside.
We'll get back to the stinger with the medical purpose in a sec. So, hives under decks outdoors. What's the best way to handle it? You want to catch it early, right?
Usually, when they go underneath the decking of a back patio area or a porch or whatever,
You got to catch it early so you can do it live.
if you
right?
can get up underneath it and there's enough space for a person to get under it, some of them you can walk under them, like 5 or 6 feet above the ground. And if you can get to the hive that way, you don't actually have to cut the deck open in order to get to the hive. But if it's low to the ground and there's not enough room for you to go underneath it to get access to the hive, well, then you would have to you'd have to cut the boards on the center of the rafters and then pull the boards up in order to gain access to the hive. You'd want to smoke them down first to docile them down, and if they're too aggressive, I know a lot of people don't want to kill the bees, and we're with you on that. We feel the same way, but sometimes for safety, depending on their aggression, sometimes it is necessary, especially if you're in an area where Africanized bees are prevalent.
Yeah, it all depends on where you live and how long the bees have been there for and how aggressive they are.
Odds join. What's up, Odds?
Hey, Anch, how's it going, buddy?
Catching it early is always the key with any bee problem. The longer you wait, the more difficult it is to solve the problem. So you want to get it while it's in a swarm state. Within the first 2 weeks, that's when we have the best chance of doing a live removal and relocating the bees. The bigger the hive, and because we're in San Diego, the more established the hive, the more defensive they're going to be. And defensive bees plus Africanized bees equals a public safety risk. So it really just depends on where you live and how long those bees have been there.
That's a good point you bring up.
Can
because
we tour our office?
On
it's
Google.
Such a mess.
Check it out on Google. Do a search for Bee Best Bee Removal on Google, and you can do their virtual tour.
BeBestInc.com.
We'd prefer you do it on Google, because we actually took a little bit of time to make sure it was presentable. And this is a working office, so it's not always kept that tidy. But
What's up, Dima?
how's it going, bud? Thanks
Hey,
for meeting
But
us.
somebody asked the question, I want to get back to it,
Okay.
about the medicinal value of the stinger. You hear about people with medical problems purposely stinging themselves. What's that all about?
There have been some studies conducted on people with rheumatoid arthritis, RA, and they find that when they get stung on their hands, and beekeepers who participated in a survey found that when they got stung on their hands or their knuckles, that it greatly reduced the inflammation and stiffness in their joints. And this is interesting, but I've been stung in the hands before, and I've experienced the same feeling for days afterwards. It will last for about a week, but the problem with that is you don't want to keep stinging yourself, because you could build up a sensitivity to the venom and eventually become allergic to the bee venom.
Radical is absolutely fascinated right now, by the way. But go ahead and continue.
Yeah, hey, right on. But the thing is, you have to be careful about how often you do it. But there are people who benefit greatly from this, and there's multiple uses for bee venom, royal jelly. Even people who have burns or cuts, they believe that getting raw organic honey that's not treated or played with, they put it on their wound, and then they put a little gauze dressing over it, and they said that they found that they have a huge improvement in the body's ability to heal itself.
Jenny just joined. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you guys for
Thanks
the
for
hearts.
joining.
Keep tapping for the hearts. Do this.
Yeah.
Tap for the hearts. Tap for the hearts. Cool. Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So you were talking about that deck. I had a question regarding that deck. Now, what if you don't know if it's a hive or a swarm? How you tell the difference, and what do you do? I mean, what are you gonna do with that?
That's a good question.
Hello, Cole. How you doing?
Thanks for joining us. The way you would tell, sometimes it requires a trained eye, someone who knows what they're looking at in order to be able to tell, because they're going to look at some key evidence that's going to be a determining factor whether or not they have a hive or not. The main thing is They're going to look for a person who has some experience is going to look at the opening where they're entering the crack or hole.
What's up, Leslie?
Hey, thanks for joining. And they're going to look at the landing stain. A landing stain will not start to be evident in a hive until about 3 to 4 weeks. After about 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to start to see a slight staining around the entrance of the hive. Now, that's not always visible if it's on a very dark surface. You might not notice it. On the lighter surfaces or cleaner surfaces, you'll be able to tell. And again, that would be with someone who has some experience that knows what they're looking for. There's other things you look for, I look for, and other seasoned professionals. They're going to look for a lot of spider webs, because whenever there's a beehive and it's been there for a while, you're going to see a lot of spiders, because that beehive is a smorgasbord of bees, and they go after them, they'll eat them, they get caught in their webs. So anytime I see a lot of spider webs and I see a lot of cobwebs around the area, and I see real big fat spiders that are twice the size they should be, I know that hive's been there for a while.
Well, we saw spider webs on that roof, right? And then those bees stuck inside of it.
That's good.
They're like translucent or transparent.
That's right.
Like all their guts were being sucked out
Yep.
or something.
And here's something that's kind of interesting. I've gone to jobs where people know about the landing stain because they've had hives before. So they'll clean up the area, they'll spray the beehive, and then they'll repaint it with fresh paint. But then I'll go out and I'll look, and I won't see a landing stain, but I'll see dead carcasses on the outer area, and I'll see a huge amount of spider webs in that area. And I know the hive's been there for a while. I know someone just sprayed it and painted over it, and I'll tell them this hive's been here for many years. This isn't a new hive. Sometimes the people know because they're the same people that did it, and they're trying to get around paying the kind of money that needs to be paid in order to get the job done properly. And they'll look at me, their jaw will drop about hit the floor, and they'll say, "How did you know?"
Somebody wanted to know how long you've been working with bees.
I've been working with bees now for about 37 years.
And you
Why?
started when you were how old?
I started working with bees when I was about 15 years old, and after about my 10th or 12th sting, I knew I was hooked.
Pellin's face was like, ah.
This is something we covered in our last scope. Honey, eating local honey and reducing allergy symptoms. Do you want to go over that real quick?
Eating honey and allergy symptoms.
Hello, Mehmet.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for joining. There's a lot of people who will get raw honey from local beekeepers in their community, from farmers markets or backyard beekeepers. And then what they'll do is they'll also get bee pollen. You put a pollen trap on the bottom of the hive. That way you're eating pollen and honey. They say typically the people who are experienced at this sort of thing will say about 5 to 10 miles within that distance. The closer you get it to your community where you live, the more beneficial the ability to reduce the allergies, because you're eating the plants and the pollens and the stuff from your neighborhood.
Uh-oh, we got a call.
Sorry about that. No, I said poor connection.
Nothing important.
Nothing important.
No.
I seriously doubt we're getting bee calls today. It's about 52 degrees outside and it's raining off and on.
Well, that's
so
a good topic. Why don't bees fly when it's cold?
Well, because when it's cold and rainy, they're not going to be out pollinating flowers because it's not warm enough and none of the flowers are open. It's not to say they're not out working, but they're not going to be as many bees out in the cold, rainy weather.
That's what we were talking about when it's cold and they protect the hive more. So that's when we got on that subject of cracking that pot, right?
Whenever it gets cold, the bees will congregate inside the nucleus of the hive, which is where the brood comb is. The brood is B-R-O-O-D. That's where the babies are. That's basically the nursery inside the hive. That's where the eggs, the larvae, and the pupa are. And then they cap it over in the final stage of development. And then in 21 days, it emerges as a young nurser bee, and that bee goes to working inside the hive. And the reason they will stay more in the hive on colder days is they need to keep that brood comb at about 94.5 degrees Fahrenheit in order to secure the survival of all those babies, to keep them from dying off.
Helen V just mentioned that there are no bees in Alaska because it's too cold. They only have wasps.
Alaska in the house.
Hey, well, you know, I can believe that. You know, it's pretty bad when you got to build a tent out of blocks of ice. I can see I can see why they probably won't want.
Not everybody's an Eskimo in Alaska.
I'm just
That's
having.
one place you know you'll never live, right? I don't think a beekeeper would make a good living in Alaska. A lot of other people do, though.
Fishermen.
Fishermen, maybe polar bear
No
hunters. I think they're
So they said
protected.
they get wasps though.
Yeah, you get
No
wasp in the
bees.
summertime. You get the wasp. The wasp are all over.
Radical has a question real
Another
quick.
question for Radical.
What up, Radical? What is it, bud?
Pinky just joined.
Hey, Pinky. How's it going?
How's it going, bud? Thanks for joining, Pinky.
Hey, there might be girls. It sounds like Nikki.
Nikki.
Plain Nikki.
Ah, I don't know.
Might be a girl, so they're not a bud.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
While we're waiting for Radical's question.
Is it true that when bees poop, they die? Oh.
No, they don't die when they poop. They die when they sting, because when they sting, the stinger rips out their guts out of their ass end of their abdomen, and basically within a few hours to a few days, they'll perish.
You know what I want to talk about, man? This is I think this is gonna get everybody laughing about your whole idea of scout bees, drone bees, queens, and the whole ecosystem. Remember we were talking about that? You were saying you were gonna draw like a coloring book or like a children's book out of it.
Oh yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the drone bees. If there's any ladies out there, you'll love this, because the social system of the honeybee is absolutely amazing. I mean, obviously everybody knows it's sort of the temperament and everything about the colony is controlled by the queen, because she lays the eggs, which, you know, creates the genetic
copies, so to speak.
Right. But what is a drone? A drone is basically a male bee, because in the hive it's all female workers. It's a female ruler, the queen. But then you have a drone,
And that's why it works so efficiently, you guys, because it's all female dominated.
Daenerys, John, what's up, Daenerys?
So the thing that astounded me the most about the bees is that a drone, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not a real bee, right? It's an unfertilized egg, which makes no sense to me at all. It kind of blows my whole mind about everything you've learned about biology. But the way you get a drone bee, a male bee, is by an unfertilized egg?
That's correct, you guys. When I learned that, I was absolutely.
What part goes where when bees are created?
It blew my mind. I was like, how can an egg develop that's unfertilized? But anyway, for factual data here, that is the truth. The male bee, the drone, is an unfertilized egg, and their only purpose, believe it or not, is fertilizing the queen.
What?
And you ladies are going to love this. When they're done fertilizing the queen, she's got a little muscle that cuts that off, and they fall to the ground dead as a doornail.
And here's
Black Widow.
So the purpose of the drone, their only purpose is to mate with the queen. And if they fail at that purpose, let's say they don't fly high enough and reach her, then eventually they're frozen out by the rest of the colony. All the females get together and they create a barrier around the hive so that they cannot take any more resources from the hive, and they eventually just die. So it's a tough life for the drone. And
You wrote a whole blog on that, right?
yeah, actually, if you go to beebestinc.com and you put in the little search bar, the life of a drone or whatever, it'll tell you all about it. But
Yeah, but the
it's
queen
so
gets busy though, right?
The queen works her entire life. She's an egg-laying machine. I mean, she starts from morning to night, and she's constantly around the clock working. But she's got what's called a queen host, which is basically anywhere from about 50 to a couple hundred bees that surround her, and all they do is they feed her, they fan her, they give her food, and they make sure that she can continue to lay eggs. And she lays about 16 to 1700 or more eggs a day, and it could be more or less depending on the time of the season. In the spring and summer months, whenever the hives are at a growth rate that's really the population's expanding, she can lay more eggs.
what happens when you take a queen out of the hive? Does the hive just automatically die? Or
No,
if you don't replace it with a queen.
Yeah, that's a good question. She asked, Albert asked, what happens if you take the queen out of the hive? Let's say
We're going to get to that question about sexual reproduction in a sec, so just hang on.
Let's say, for example, let's bring up a real life scenario. Let's say a swarm takes flight out of a tree. The hive's gotten big and a swarm's produced, and it takes flight. As it's flying, let's say it goes across a freeway or a roadway, and the queen gets smashed into the radiator of the car, and a lot of the bees do die that way. A lot of bugs do, actually. And let's say the queen happens to get killed. She gets smashed into the radiator, but the bulk of the swarm stays intact, and they continue to fly, and they land where they were originally going to go to, but they get there and they don't have a queen. What happens is the youngest bees in the colony will start feeding worker bees, and this is called a laying worker, because the queen that's produced wasn't a queen at birth laid in a cell from an egg. It was produced by them feeding this bee exclusively royal jelly, which allows her ovaries to fully develop so she can lay eggs. Then what they'll do is they'll start laying eggs in the cells, and they'll create a queen, and that will become the new monarch of the hive. And the colony is the one that dictates what queen is going to be the monarch of the colony.
All right, so to feed Radical's question.
Well, I kind of want to know too, because I don't know the answer to this. What happens physically? Like, what is the sexual reproduction look like? We're getting a little bit kinky here. How do bees mate?
Ooh. What's up,
Well,
Robert?
How they mate is basically whenever what it's called the prenuptial flight of the queen. What happens is when an unmated queen takes flight out of a colony, and this happens sometimes. People will call us and say, "We saw the swarm take flight. It landed up in a tree about 30 feet, 35 feet above the ground, and then the swarm came back down." What happens is when she's flying up in the air, there's drones that are picking up on her scent, and they're in flight mating. They're basically inserting their male genitalia into her, and they're depositing their sperm into her, and she's got a spermathacha, which actually holds the sperm of multiple drones. That's why when she flies up high enough so that only the strongest drones can reach her. Once she's done doing this and she's mated with 10 or 12 or 15 drones, then she's done, because she's got enough sperm inside of her to fertilize all the eggs for the rest of her life. She will only do one prenuptial flight in her lifetime, and it has to be enough to last her for the rest of her life. She doesn't do it ever again.
Wow, so she gets around, dude.
She mates with quite a few males, but she gets it done all in a day.
But not all the eggs become fertilized. Hence, that's why you have drones later, because
Right.
when she lays eggs.
Not all the eggs are fertilized, because a lot of those eggs that are laid are males, which are drones, so they don't need to have that in order to fertilize them. But it's just interesting to think that they know to fly high enough, and the reason they fly 20 to 25 meters above the ground is that only the strongest drones will reach her. Now here's the other
And here's
thing.
the thing, though: the strong ones don't
What?
survive because
What?
they die instantly during the mating
So they
process.
think they're heroes.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. I get people, they say, "I don't understand. My bees were great last year, a few years ago. I could walk right by the hive, no problem. They would never attack me. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these bees just became really aggressive." Because if one or a couple of those drones that mated with her when she did her prenuptial flight were Africanized hybrid bees, then you're going to have some male sperm in there that's from the Africanized hybrid bees that are fertilizing the eggs. That will determine the temperament of the bee colony. That's why
So they become
more
defensive.
defensive. So that's why it would change.
But they don't just become more defensive. Let's be a little bit fair to the Africanized bees. They also become stronger, right?
They're stronger. There's a
They
lot of good.
produce more honey in a quicker amount of time. They're
Right.
much more defensive. In a lot of ways, they are just healthier, stronger bees, but not so good for us humans who have to live nearby them.
You know, but it's a good point Albert brings up. You know, a lot of the beekeepers and scientists are working with the Africanized hybrid honeybees, and even the ones where it's almost 100% when you get out into the deserts like Arizona and Nevada and areas like that. They're finding that these bees are almost impervious to the mites. The mites that are wiping out the wild bees, the Africanized hybrid bees don't seem to be affected by it, and they're able to basically fight them off. So what they're doing is they're actually using the Africanized bees to find out what it is in their colonies that makes them so strong that they can fight the mites off and keep them from taking over the colony and
What's up,
destroying it.
Taylor?
Thanks,
Hey,
Cole,
thanks for joining.
joining us. Appreciate all your questions.
He goes, I'm so sorry about. I got to thank you so much for teaching me about bees. Thanks.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
So if you guys like this bee sex topic, do the hearts, tap the screen, do some hearts for us.
Who doesn't love bee sex? Come on.
Brings a whole new meaning to be kinky.
Bee so honey. What's up, Stam?
Anybody else have any other questions for the Bee Whisperer?
Where are you guys from? Tell us where you guys are.
Yeah, what part of town are
scoping
you
from.
in? Are you in our country? Are you overseas or abroad? We're dying to know. We're here in San Diego, so that's why we're kind of talking about Africanized bees. It's something we deal with on a
You
regular
guys have a
basis.
bee problem? Oh, Seattle in the house.
Hey, Seattle, thanks for joining. What do you guys got going on up there? Imagine you got a lot of beehives up there.
So they got a lot of rain right now, don't they?
You guys got a ton of rain from this last system. We're starting to get it now. It's come down our way.
Haluk in the
Hey,
house.
Haluk. How's
Hey,
it
Haluk.
going? We're answering your bee questions right now.
So we talked about beehives in the roof. What else? What else did we talk about today?
The sexual mating habits of the honeybee, drones, the male bee.
We talked about the queen, the drone.
Anchorage in the house.
Anchorage.
Alaska.
We talked about the benefits of eating pollen and honey, how it can help with your allergies. You know, you buy it from a local source within your community where you live. What else? We talked
about the sad life of a drone, a male bee, how tough it is for them.
How they die right after having sex with the bee.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
they're-
sad. I'll tell you, I wouldn't want that job. You know, I think I'd rather be a worker bee.
Poor drone bees. What did you call them? They're just honey guzzlers.
They're honey guzzlers because all they do is they eat, and you know what else they do. And when they ain't doing that other job they're supposed to do, all they're doing is hoarding up all that honey. So when it gets late summer into the early fall months, the worker bees, the females, they'll push them out and starve them to death, or they'll sting them to death.
Pelin wants to know if bees were to disappear, how would that affect our ecosystem?
You know, it's a good question. There's a lot of scientists that believe, in fact, Albert Einstein believed that within 4 years of honeybees disappearing from the earth, man would soon be behind them within about that time frame.
Why is that?
Why are bees so important?
The most important thing that the honeybees do is they provide food for us humans. There are many crops that we eat, almonds and fruits and many other things, that they are 90 to 100% responsible for the pollination of those food substances which man consumes. And if you don't have those pollinators, you're not going to have the food crop yield. For example, you can go out here to East County. We have orange groves where there's 50 acres of orange trees. And I'm just going to give you some roundabout numbers here. It could be more or less. It's not an exact science. But they have 50 acres. They call in a commercial beekeeper, and he drops off about 650 hives. And so that you know, these are like 3 and 4 stacker hives with probably 50 to 60,000 bees, if not more. Their
Rain
crop.
just joined. What's up, Ray?
Hey, thanks for joining. Their crop yield increase on that 50-acre piece of land is about 100% increase, if not more, from the bees being on that property. So let's say the guy's going to produce about $6 million worth of crop that year. He's going to produce somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 to $13 million or more worth of crop yield just from the bees pollinating his trees. Now, if you look at not just the monetary impact, but you also look at the amount of fruit, the extra surplus fruit that's produced from that, it's incredible what these animals do.
And I just want to say, welcome back, Cole. Thanks for joining us again. And thanks for everyone else who's joining with us.
Guess who? Mr. B.
Mr. B. Right on. So, what else were we talking about?
They were talking about the Pollinator Protection Act. We were talking about how bees pollinate and produce food. We were talking about the life cycle of the different caste of bees. There's the social caste, which is the queen, the worker bees, and the drone. The queen being the monarch of the hive, the worker bees being all the females that work and provide the food and collect the pollen and gather all the food and build the cells inside the hive. And then, of course, last but not least, the male, which fertilizes the queen and then eats up a lot of honey until
What's up, Gabriel?
pushed out.
Hey, Gabriel.
Thanks for joining.
So we talked about the drone and the fate of the male bee. Let's talk about the worker bees. What kind of worker bees are there? There's the queen. She's not a worker, though. She doesn't do any work. All she does is lay eggs.
Well, she works, but her job consists of just primarily one thing, laying eggs, and that's it. And then she's got a queen host, which is 50 to a couple hundred bees. They fan her, they cool her, and they feed her, and they make sure that all of her needs are met so that she can continue to just laying eggs. I mean, if you watch her in any films online and you see a working queen, I mean, she's literally every 20 to 30 seconds sticking her ovial depositor down in an egg, down in a cell, laying an egg. And then she goes from that and it goes to the next cell. And that's all she does all day long is lay eggs and produce babies which grow and build the hive and the colony.
Cole said it's a risky business. Any stories you want to share? Close calls that you had, or?
Oh man, I've had so many. Let's see, the most recent one. I'm trying to think.
What's the highest job you've done?
The highest job off the ground I did here in San Diego, downtown San Diego actually, which was at the Hyatt Grand Regency. It was on the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, blinking lights for aircraft, because it's the tallest building downtown. I think it's like 22 stories above the ground. And they had bee swarms on the top of the building. And we had to go up there with vacuums and vacuum the bees off the lights.
You did it live?
I did it live. We ran over 600 feet of cable. The hotel actually brought the cables up for us. It took us from the time we parked our truck in the bottom loading bays to get up and run all the cable, 2.5 hours just to run the cable and get set up.
Wow. So when you're looking down, right, how high were you up?
22 floors above the ground. You figure probably 10 or 12 feet per floor. So if I had to guess, I would say probably
Almost 300 feet.
Probably more than 300 feet. I'd say probably like a football field or higher off the ground.
It's one of the tallest buildings downtown. It really is, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the tallest building. And sometimes we get them low to the ground too. They'll be inside the manhole covers. They'll build hives in there. In fact, sometimes city workers go out and they go to do maintenance and they get that big metal bar and they stick it down in there to crack the lid. And the minute they go to pry it, they notice bees flying out of there attacking them. So we go out and we try to crack the lid open, and of course I can't because I don't weigh enough, so I got to get another person out there so we can get enough leverage to basically pull the lid open, because the hive has cemented the lid down to the manhole cover. We did one here in San Diego down in Chula Vista community. The thing ended up weighing about 120, 110 pounds, and I literally had to have me and another guy, we had about a 400-pound weight on a big 6-foot breaker bar in order to crack the lid open.
What's up, Jose?
Hey, thanks for joining.
And Merrick, how's it going, everybody? We're talking about bees. Ask your questions. We got the bee whisperer here, an expert on bees.
I'm trying to think of the most exciting job I did here recently. Well, I could tell you one I did here. It was a while ago. I went up into this guy's attic. He had bumblebees in his attic.
Oh, the bumblebees.
Yeah, you remember that one?
I want to hear that.
Yeah. So anyway, I go up in this guy's attic. This was many years ago, back when we had a lot more bumblebees here in the county. But I go up in there, and his attic wasn't very tall. It was only like 3.5 feet, like literally like 40 inches from the top to the bottom. So I had to crawl on my belly, and as I'm crawling up, as I get closer and closer, they could feel my vibrations and they're buzzing. When I get about 4 or 5 feet from the hive, the ceiling rafters in front of me, I see all these little bumblebee heads all poke up and they're all looking at me. And as I'm crawling towards them, they're looking and they're crawling towards me, and it was like the standoff at the Alamo.
Cole wants to know how much longer we're going to be on here. Not too much longer, actually. We're getting ready to finish up soon. So if you have your questions about bees, now's the time to ask it. You got the bee whisperer here.
Free advice, guys. Don't spray your bees with water guns.
Don't spray water on them. Don't spray them yourself. If you've got bees, if it's safe to do so, hire a professional. Try to save them when you can, because we really need to protect these pollinators. They do wonderful things for humankind, and they're great for the planet. And if you can do a removal without the use of pesticides when it's safe to do so and save the bees in the process, it's a win-win all the way around.
You don't want to have what happened in China. You see those images of, because I guess they're having a crisis with the honeybee in China. I'm not sure if it's pollution or pesticides.
It's pollution, yeah.
But they actually have to hand pollinate their flowers, human beings, which is crazy. It's so inefficient. The honeybee is designed and meant to pollinate crops and flowers, which is so essential for the types of foods that we eat. And
Jose wants to know, can we eat bees?
You can eat bees, but I'd highly recommend you pull the stinger out first, dip them in chocolate, and then pop them in your mouth. Well, now I've never done that, but my boss I used to work for, this guy was crazy.
The
by
guy
the way,
who taught you everything you know, right?
He would take the bee. He would tell me to go in the backyard, grab a bee for me. I would bring it in. He'd grab it by its wings. He would tap the bee on his hand, sting himself, scrape the stinger out, and then pop the bee in his mouth, and he'd eat it. I thought he was crazy. And you know what? He was crazy. And have I ever done it? No. Do I recommend you do it? No. But if you're so inclined, just make sure the stinger's out.
No, we don't want to be eating bees. No, that's why they make honey for us. We like the honey, though.
He says, I would like bees more if they didn't have a stinger.
Me too.
You know
are there
what?
any bees that don't have a stinger?
There are some variety of bees that don't have stingers. They have mandibles and they kind of bite. They're like the
carpenter
carpenter bee. Yeah, there's some bees they don't have the stinger, but yet they can still chew. You know, they
But
can
they
bite.
don't make the honey, do they?
They produce the honey, but it's not like the honeybee where it produces such a volume of honey.
Connigan join, Londi join. What's up, guys or girls?
I've never been stung either, Cole. I don't know. Why don't you describe what it's like to be stung?
You know, I mean, people ask me what does it feel like, and this is what I tell them. This is the closest thing that I can kind of explain.
Come on, Jose.
Jose said that bees make him hard. Well, don't they make you hard a little bit?
Well, I don't know about that.
Just a little bit.
But anyway, it's like taking a needle, a sewing needle, sticking it over a flame until it turns white hot, and then jabbing it in your skin. That's about what it feels like. Only thing is, the pain lasts for probably a good hour or so after you get stung.
Somebody wants to know how you got the name Bee Whisperer.
You know what?
Actually, he didn't call himself that. It's something us here in the office did, because he has this weird, uncanny way of knowing where hives are inside of a building. So I remember a customer called us up once, and she said that she had multiple companies out trying to find a hive that was inside her house, and she had no idea where they were and how they were getting in her house. And she said it was so amazing, you know, Jeff came over and he started sniffing my walls and he started tapping on the walls, and he said, it's right here, it's right here. And she said, well, how do you know? Everybody else that came out here couldn't figure out where it was. How do you know it's there? And he said, do you have a screwdriver? He grabbed the screwdriver, busted it into the drywall. What happened when you pulled it out?
Twirled it around a little bit. I could feel the resistance of the hive. Pulled it out, and I took my finger and I wiped the honey off. I go, there's the hive. There's the honey dripping off the end of the screwdriver.
So
she couldn't believe it.
What's up, Zeki?
Long story short, we call him the Bee Whisperer because he's been working with bees since he was 15, and he has an uncanny way of knowing how bees behave, where they move into a structure, where their hive is located. Because sometimes that's the hardest part of the job, is figuring out where the hive is inside the roof or the wall. And you've been doing it for so long that it's like second nature to you. You can actually see it in your mind. You look at where they're going in, and then you kind of know, just based on the amount of years that you've been doing this, where they're.
Yeah, it's pretty much an experience type thing. Just from 25, 30,000 jobs. I've done so many structural jobs now that when I see bees entering the structure, when I'm looking at it, I kind of have an idea in my mind where I think the hive is. And then too, sometimes at nighttime when I go to bed, I'll be thinking about the job, and then I can see where the hive is in my mind's eye. I can see where the hive's hanging up inside the structure, and I would say 99.9% of the time I'm right on the money. In fact, today I went to a job. The guy was telling me where he said the hive was, and I said, no, the hive's not there. He goes, how do you know? I said, because the bees, when they enter, are usually going to be within a foot or two of the hive. So he took me inside his house, looked around a little bit. I felt the wall, right where I said the hive was where you could feel the heat transferring through the wall. That's that area where the brood comb is, because they keep it 94.5 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take.
What's up, Bee-Boo?
Hey, thanks for joining. And sure enough, the customer took his hand, he felt, and he says, wow, that's amazing, because exactly where I told him it would be. But I mean, that's anyone. If you do anything for 30 plus years or 20, 30 years or longer, you're going to get really good at it.
Fear Twitch, what's up, Fear Twitch?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt to get stung? Well, here's the thing you have to know about this guy is he gets stung all the time on a weekly basis.
Not weekly, but a monthly. I'd say monthly.
He's smarter than that.
But he also has a fear of getting shots and blood drawn and needles. It's the weirdest thing, right?
But he loves to get stung by a bee.
But here's the big difference. When you're going to get your blood drawn, you know the needle's coming into your arm. You know you're going to get poked by a needle. When I get stung by a bee, I don't know what's going to happen ever. When it happens, it catches me off guard. It's not like I'm sitting there like this with my arm exposed, So it's
but
totally different.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it with a bee?
I would say, well, if it stings you through the shirt or through the uniform, it's not a direct hit. I'd say it's probably about a 2 or 3.
And
if it's direct hit and you
shot?
get stung on your hand, it's an 8 or a 9 or a 10, depending on how many stings you get.
What about getting your blood drawn?
Ironically, a bee sting is a lot more painful, the actual pain, but the psychological pain of the needle coming to my arm is more painful.
Where's the weirdest place you've gotten stung, dude?
I've never been stung in any of the areas, private parts, and you know. But the most painful place I've been stung, believe it or not, is on the end of the nose.
You look like Rudolph.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. Hey, Krusty the Clown, he didn't have nothing on me.
Yeah, for some reason when you get stung in the face, it really
it
just
hurts.
swells up from what I've seen.
Yeah, when you get stung anywhere in the face, but there's something about the nose. When you get stung on the end of the nose, I mean, the next day when you get out of bed and your nose is all puffed up and your eyes, sometimes your eyes are all puffed and you can barely see out of your eyes. I mean, it's I'd have to say the most painful place I ever been stung.
If you guys want to see him get stung on the Periscope, tap for some hearts. Give us some hearts. Next Periscope, we're going to get him stung.
So we're getting ready to wrap up. So any final questions before we end? Just giving everybody a 3-minute notice that we're
Dude, they want you to get stung, bro.
Hey, do you guys want to see me get stung? Do you really want to see that? Is that what you want? Okay, then I want to see you eat that bee without pulling the stinger out first then.
How do I have kids with a bee?
How do
What?
I have kids with a bee?
How do bees have kids? We went over that, didn't we?
No, I mean, how do I have... Do you mean should you keep a hive box on your property if you have
that's
children? Or do you mean you want to mate with a bee?
Can I adopt a bee? He said.
You want to adopt a
How do you
bee?
adopt a bee?
There, you can't adopt a single bee, but you can actually join groups, or you could donate money to the beekeeping cause, such as the Beekeeping Society in your community that you live in. Or you can get together with groups that are doing everything they can to help preserve the honeybee.
That's some freaky stuff right there, you know.
Well, you certainly want a wife that's sweet as honey,
You,
right?
you just want to make sure of one thing though. Remember what I told you about the drone? What happens after he mates with the queen? So if your wife's the queen, you know what happens.
Fair warning, dude. Fair warning.
Disclaimer.
You guys, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for all of your questions, especially you, Cole. All right. Yeah, we've had a blast, and we hopefully we're going to do this again in a week, every Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a good time. Look forward to seeing you guys next scope. Take care, all.
Have a good one.
Tap for the
joining.
hearts.